chapter 2, I want to, as best we can, set the scene for you and try to put yourself in the place of Naomi and Ruth as we enter into the second chapter of this book. And so it's almost impossible for us to do, but I mean, we need to kind of go back on what was life like. And sometimes for some of you, you've talked to a grandparent, a great-grandparent, and that's 100-something years ago, and you think about, man, our nation, our world back then, and some of the things they went through, like that's so difficult, that's so hard, okay? So we've seen that even in like great-parents and great-grandparents, but now I need you to go back, not just 100 years, like 3,000 years. So I need you to imagine, what are the creature comforts 3,000 years ago? There's no technology or any sort of digital, no AC, just no hospital, could you imagine, a great day for someone who lived 3,000 years ago? It's probably a terrible day for us. There's no grocery stores, all this type of stuff. And so this is the setting. It's so long ago. And now in Bethlehem, in the house of bread, there comes a famine. So I would already say, I don't want to live 3,000 years ago. That doesn't sound like a great time to live. And now there's a famine in the land. And so this family, Elimelech and Naomi, they're so hungry, so starving, in such need of food, which again, is hard for us to imagine. Our pantries are full. There's 17 grocery stores within a mile of this church. You can go to just restaurants popping up all over the place. But if you could ever imagine what it would be like to not have a pantry full of food and I can't get anywhere, I gotta grow it or I don't eat, and now there's a famine. So much so desperate, so starving, trying not to die, Elimelech decides to leave the promised land, leave this land that God has given them, and go to a pagan foreign nation. This is gonna be a 7 to 10 day journey on foot. And people did not do this. Where you were born is where you lived and where you died. But now, because of such desperation, because of such dire need and starvation, they're gonna go to a pagan foreign land. They're gonna take a 7 to 10 day journey by foot through some of that wilderness that you just saw up there, Judean wilderness, and they're gonna head to Moab. Now, here, when they get to Moab, you have to realize, he doesn't have land in Moab. He doesn't have a network, he doesn't have connections, he doesn't have resources. I don't know what they brought, they just show up because this place might have some food. And so this is the situation they're in. How desperate are they at this point? Now, while they're there, the very thing they were trying to avoid, which is death, actually came upon them. And so Naomi loses a husband. Some of y'all have felt the sting of a loss of a spouse. I've sat in some of your homes the day after, the day of, when your spouse died, and I just watched the grief that overtakes people in that moment. And so Naomi's had to live through that, to watch her husband pass away. Then she has to watch a child die. Some of you have felt the sting and the weight and the dark cloud of grief that has come on you because you've lost a child. And then she loses another child, her second son. All the children she's had completely gone, has suffered this crushing, soul-crushing weight of grief. So you're 3,000 years ago in a land that's not your own, trying to barely hang on and survive by moving and getting some other land, and now you've had the death of 2 sons and your husband. And so Orpah stays in Moab. Ruth has a conversion experience. My God will be your God, right? Your people will be my people. Where you die, I'll die. She clings to Naomi for some reason and comes back to Bethlehem 10 years after they left. And so when she rolls up in Bethlehem, people are like, Naomi? Could you imagine how different she must have looked after having gone through all that? So now you got 2 women making a 7 to 10 day journey on foot back to Bethlehem. What do they have? They're not stopping at Buc-ee's along the way and picking up. How are they making it? I don't understand. This is not a day and age where women could just rise up and take on and take care for themselves. This is 3,000 years ago in a patriarchal society. They are destitute. A day away from dying themselves. And so she rolls up into Bethlehem, and they're like, Naomi, which means sweet and pleasant. She's like, don't call me that. Not pleasant, I'm not sweet anymore. My name's bitter, my name's Mara, for the Lord has delivered a bitter blow to me. And I remember as a child kind of reading this story, I'm like, oh, grumpy pants, like she's, doesn't seem very fun to be around. And then I've lived a little bit. And I've watched myself and some of you get punched in the mouth by life. And I look at that response in a much different way. I think that's about as gracious and good as a response as humanly possible. I'm surprised she didn't just walk out into the desert and die. Something she held on to. But when she got back in Bethlehem, she said, I'm bitter, as you would be, and as I would be, maybe even worse. So that's the end of one. It says they get into Bethlehem at the time of the barley harvest. Famine's over. The house of bread has some bread again in this dark, gloomy depression and cloud. A glimmer, a sliver of hope shows up for these two. That maybe they're here and maybe they're gonna get some food. The barley harvest would be at the end of March, early April. It's the first of the harvesting seasons. The glimmer and sliver of hope is that maybe they'll be able to stack up enough as poor, homeless beggars to maybe make it through the next season, because now there's no men in their life and they've got nothing. And so this is the scene. Can you feel what they feel when they come into that? Ruth chapter 2. They're in Bethlehem now. Ruth, the Moabite, said to Naomi, let me go to the field, glean from among the ears of grain after him whose sight I shall find favor. And she said to her, go, my daughter. Imagine your child comes up to you one day and says, hey, mom, dad, can I do all the laundry in the house today? Can I clean the entire house? Give me your errand list. I'll go run every single one. I'll do all the work for the family to keep it going. You're like, absolutely, go ahead. And this is what's happening. She's come to her and goes, we've got to get food to eat and to live. Can I go and glean? Now, in those days, there was a provision for people like this. The Mosaic Law had provision for the alien, for the orphan, and for the widow, prescribing that harvesters deliberately leave grain in the corners of their field for the economically vulnerable classes. The margins were for the marginalized. They would say, don't go back and gather ears of grain as they might have dropped. So this is God's ancient welfare plan 3,000 years ago. And what was happening was, like, you didn't harvest the margins, the corners. Those were just to be left. And then if you were harvesting and you dropped something, you were not supposed to pick it up. You just leave it there. And when you go through the first time, whatever you pick, like, you can't go back through and make sure you got it all. And so those that were left there, that was kind of like the provision for the poor, the orphan, the widow, the alien. And here's what you have to realize. It's not mandatorily taken from them. There is choice in this. This is what God set up, and he goes, hey, this is my desired will to care for these vulnerable classes, and you can obey me and be open-handed with generosity, or you can be close-fisted greed, but no one's making them do this. This is optional. And so there's no agency, there's no entity that's saying, all right, give us this, and we'll take it, we'll do. And this is not a handout. This is hard work, because there's dignity in work. So there wasn't like God said, like, hey, yeah, like, go take it, harvest it, do all this stuff, turn it into bread, then just give it to the poor. They said, no, invite the poor and let them come pick it and pluck it and thresh it and, grind it and make bread out of it. So there's dignity in the work. Now, again, this is not mandatory. They had the landowner, field owner, has a choice. Am I going to be obedient to God and generous with what he's given me, or am I going to be close-fisted and stingy and greedy? Now, what time period was this? The Judges. A time when everybody did what was right in their own eyes. So you tell me, how many people are doing this? How many people are like, absolutely, come on, orphans, all you widows in the field, I'm gonna leave my corners. How easy would it be for a landowner to go like, if you drop it, you better bend down and pick that up. Go ahead and harvest the corners. Yep, we're running through. We are maximizing profit here. If you see some alien trying to come in and take my crop, I've worked hard for this. We just got to have a famine. Don't let them in. This is what it could be. So Ruth can glean on two accounts. She's a widow and she's an alien. But it's for those two reasons Ruth expects maybe not to find favor, maybe to be rejected. Maybe someone go like, get out of here, you different, you alien, you foreigner, you stranger, you're just a parasite on my land, get out. So she says, I have to find favor. And so I need you to feel the tension in this passage. So you have a young woman who's foreign, who's different, who's strange, and she's gonna go out into a field alone with a bunch of men. Do you think that in a day and age where everyone did what's right in their own eyes, that young, strange, foreign women who are vulnerable were not just stared at, commented on, catcalled? Hey, sweetheart, what you doing out here? Do you not think that they were pushed and pressured and harassed and molested and abused and taken advantage of? Of course they were. But this is what she's going into, and the audience ought to feel that tension. I mean, imagine, ladies, if we sent you to another country by yourself. Here, go into a male-dominated, go onto a construction site and just good luck. No one there to care for you. You think it's gonna go well for you? Right? So the audience should feel this tension. I wonder if Naomi feels it. She said, go, daughter. She knew what she was releasing her to. And I don't know if she was just so bitter, she didn't care what happened, she was calloused. Or I don't know if she was so desperate and starving, it was a necessary risk they had to take. But Ruth feels the tension. She knows she's got a big target on her back. She is so vulnerable, so desperate. And that's why she says, I have to find favor. I'm the biggest person to be taken advantage of. And unless someone shows me grace and kindness and compassion and pity, I'm toast. I have to find favor. This word that she uses there, have to find favor, if you'll remember, it even harkens back to the same word used in the book of Esther. When Esther, the queen, right, learns of this plot to kill the Jews, and her uncle's saying like, hey, you've got to go to the king. You've got to stop this. And she's telling Mordecai, she's like, I can't just waltz into the inner court of the king. If you just do that uninvited, he can kill you. And she finally comes into herself. She goes, you know what? If I die, I die. But I'm going in. And so she goes into the courtroom and she says, I hope I find favor. Same word used here. What is that? You are completely dependent upon the mercy and grace of a king, lord, or overseer. And so that's what Ruth knows she is. I am completely dependent upon the mercy and grace of some overseer. And this is how she goes into the field. So she set out, verse 3, she went, she gleaned in the field after the reapers, and she happened to come to a part of the field belonging to Boaz, who was of the clan of Elimelech. Now, the word happened there, you absolutely ought to hear the irony in that. The author is being so tongue-in-cheek here. It's like, yeah, just as luck would have it, just so happens, right? That's what they're saying. They're like almost mocking it. So here's what one scholar says about this happened. They're excessively attributing Ruth's good fortune to chance for the purpose of undermining purely rational explanations for human experiences and to refine the reader's understanding of providence. In reality, the author is screaming, see the hand of God at work here. This woman who has to have favor and compassion and grace or she's toast, just so happens to come into a field where she's going to find favor, just so happens that he's a family member. So you have tribes, then you have clans, which is kind of like extended family, then you have families. He just happens to be in the clan of Elimelech. Just so happens, so the author's saying here, no. There is no such thing as chance or luck. It is all the providence of God. God's miracles, his supernatural, that's his visible hand, his overt hand. You see it, no. This right here, providence is God's silent hand. It's his invisible hand, taking the free will choices of mankind, yet using them, guiding them, governing them, orchestrating them, superintending over them to derive his desired outcome. And that's what the author's saying here. This is no chance. This is the invisible silent hand of God with providence. Talks about coming into Boaz. Well, who is this guy, Boaz? Verse 1 tells us a little bit about him. Now Naomi had a relative of her husband's, a worthy man of the clan of Elimelech, whose name was Boaz. Bit of dramatic irony here because Ruth doesn't know who Boaz is. So the author says, I'm gonna kind of tell the audience, who Boaz. I'm gonna give you just a little bit of his reputation, kind of what kind of guy he is. And so Ruth doesn't know, but you've got kind of insider information and knowledge. So it's a device used to kind of pull the reader in, to suck you in to the story of what's happening here. And so we learn this. What we learn about Boaz, he's a worthy man. That term that's translated worthy, a couple of ways we can understand this. Number one, at minimum, it means the dude's loaded, okay? He is wealthy, he is a man of standing, he's got it stacked up, okay? So that's at minimum, we see that in scripture, the same word used, wealthy. Again, he's a landowner here in this day and age. Secondly, it's the same word used in Proverbs 31. It says, a wife of excellent character, a noble wife who can find. That's the same word used here. So yes, wealthy man, he's loaded, stacking it up. Also, he's noble, excellent. And lastly, this right here, this worthy man, is also used to describe Gideon in Judges when it says Gideon is a mighty man of valor. Mighty man of valor, same word used here. And you're gonna think, oh yeah, Gideon's the warrior. But I love going back and reading about Gideon. Like he might have been a judge and deliverer, but the dude was a scaredy cat, okay? Not typically I'm gonna think of mighty man of valor. Because Gideon, the angel comes to him and he says, me? He's like, my clan is the weakest clan. And he says, and I'm the lowest in my family. So he's this little scrawny or whatever in the weak clan, you know. And then he's like, well, I need a sign. And so God does this thing with the food and he burns it up. And Gideon's like, great, give me another sign. Then we do the fleece thing. And then we're like, let's run that back and do it the opposite way. And then he has another sign. Like he has to go down to like a camp and like hear the conversation. So it's not the mighty man of valor, this bold, courageous guy you think of, but that's still the word used to describe. Because here's why. Gideon, he was not bold and courageous in his own strength and might, but he was in God. Took the dude forever to obey and lots of signs along the way. But you know what he did? He did obey. He was faithful. And that's why it was called him a mighty man of valor, because of his obedience, his courage in the Lord. I think that's why this word is used of Boaz as well. Boaz is not a war hero, but he's a man who obeyed and followed God. So there's a little insider information that we, the audience, have as the story unfolds. Boaz, worthy man, it's his character. And the word character, it comes from the ancient Greek word character, which means it's like a stamp or like an imprint you put on something. So if you were to like stamp a coin or to stamp a wax seal, that's a character. And so it shows like these unique qualities. And in a sense, your character is your brand, is your logo. It's these simple things about you. And so typically what we have, people's character, especially in this story, like we don't have complex characters, right? Boaz shows up in chapter 2, it's a 4-chapter book. So you just get like 2 or 3 things about a person, but that's typically what it is. Like if I go ask people to tell me about you, what are they gonna tell me? 2 or 3 things. They're gonna kind of take these certain attributes and kind of amplify them, right? You go sit down and have a caricature of you drawn in like Jackson Square in New Orleans. What are they gonna do? They're gonna take a couple features of you and they're gonna blow them up real big, your big ears or big, whatever it is. Same thing with characters on TV shows. It's a couple of aspects and elements kind of blown up, right? Think about Michael Scott, Ron Swanson. the fawns or whomever else, right? It's this person that's got this kind of predictable behavior. These are 2, 3 things about this person. That's what we're getting in Boaz here. There's 2 to 3 kind of main things amplified by the author to show his brand, his logo, the reputation, right? And the reputation, as people say, it follows you around everywhere, but it's better said, your reputation arrives before you do. And that's what we get here in this book. Before Boaz is on the scene, we get his reputation, his character shown to us, a worthy man. What builds into that? What are the 2 or 3 things that highlight Boaz, his character? Let's look at that. First, we see this. Boaz is a man of integrity. That's one of the 3 things that kind of make up his character. Verse 4, and behold, Boaz came from Bethlehem. Now, just so you know, the original language, it's being tongue-in-cheek here again, right? Ruth just so happened to be in this field, and just as luck would have it, or just so happened, Boaz shows up at the same time. It's kind of like the tone of the author here, It's still, no. This is the silent hand of God, the providence of God in this. It says, and behold, Boaz came from Bethlehem. He said to the reapers, the Lord be with you. And they answered, and the Lord bless you. And then Boaz said to his young man who was in charge of the reapers, whose woman is this? Now, if you're making a film of this, you just build on this tension, right? Of like Ruth, the single, alone, helpless, vulnerable woman going into a field, all the horrible, bad things that could happen to her. And then, whoop, camera pans. And you see this like Range Rover, jacked up, tricked out, like coming over the hill, and it parks and the door flies open and Chris Hemsworth steps out, and he does his hair and he takes off his aviators. And he goes, the Lord bless you. Like he says this to his employees, the work crew. And what do? And the Lord bless you, Boaz. I mean, it's over the top. You want to know when you've made it as a business owner, as a boss, as a manager, as a leader, roll into work on Tuesday and do this. The Lord bless you. See if everybody pops up from their cubicles, right? This never happens. I've never been like sitting at a red light and seen like a road construction work crew where the foreman shows up. The Lord bless you. They're like, shut up, That's typically. Tells you a lot about who Boaz is. He is a man of integrity. So much so that they're having this little praise and worship, kind of I love you, no, I love you more with his employees. He's a man of integrity. He's fair. He's good. He's right to them. And we see here, man of integrity, he's letting people glean in his field. He's told his work crew, let them in. The alien, the orphan, the widow, let them in. In the day and age where he didn't have to, where a lot of people probably weren't, he was a man of integrity, obeyed God, did what was right, and they were welcome in his field. So here's what we see. The second thing of Boaz, not only is he a man of integrity, he's a man of charity. But I want to push beyond that. I mean, the part of me hated using that word because it was so simple to what he's doing here, because sometimes charity is just like throwing money at stuff, which is good. We should throw money at stuff. This is more. This is what I'm calling transformative charity. It's more than writing a check. Look what kind of man, worthy man this is. Verse 5, Boaz said to his young man who's in charge of the reapers, whose young woman is this? See, a person of transformative character sees people, doesn't gloss over them. He knows his people, his workers, and then he takes notice of someone who's different, who's a stranger, who's an outsider, and doesn't just blow them off. He's like, I want to know, who is this? Now because I've been talking about Chris Hemsworth, I need to pull the romance out of this, okay? We know the end of this book, they get married, they have a baby, but we gotta strip the romance. So much of our Western, Hollywood mindset, we wanna put romance in here, and so typically, or maybe it's just me, okay? When I would read this, and it's like, Boaz is like, whose woman is that? Like he's like, whoa, not at all the case, okay? Like Ruth looked busted, okay? She was a hot mess. Let's just be honest here, okay? She's poor, homeless. She doesn't have on the trendiest barley picking outfit, okay? She hadn't been and got that, so just imagine what she is, what she's been through, and she's out, she's working hard, she's sweating, she's dirty, there's no makeup. So don't see her as like picking barley and like, just throwing it out, It's not that at all. There is no physical attraction here. Now, maybe Ruth was beautiful, but it's not shining in this moment, okay? It's not here. So there is not this physical sexual attraction from Boaz. It is love, but it's love of choice and of compassion and of care, right? That's more of probably what's really going on here. Verse 6, and the servant who was in charge of the reapers, he answered Boaz. He said, she is the young Moabite woman who came back with Naomi from the country of Moab. She said, please, let me glean and gather among the sheaves after the reaper. So she came. She's continued from early morning until now, except for a short rest. I mean, even her integrity, right? She didn't have to ask. She had two reasons she qualified to glean, but she asked anyways. And she worked her tail off. Early morning, short little rest until now. She's desperate, right, for food. Then Boaz said to Ruth, now listen, my daughter. The second aspect of this transformative charity is that you show dignity. I mean, imagine the power discrepancy between Ruth and Boaz. Poor, homeless, destitute, beggar, woman, alone, in a field, vulnerable, male, wealthy, rich, landowner, has employees. This is a huge power discrepancy. How do you think she feels when this guy rolls up? She's watching, oh no, what's gonna happen? And his first word to her is daughter. Like there's tension between Moab and Israel. Like she's kind of parasiting off of his land. And he elevates her and gives her this beautiful daughter. You already see this kind of familial care and love and protection that he's even saying to her. Imagine what that does. He doesn't see her as some piece of meat or someone just taken off his land or some girl to be conquered. He sees her as daughter. Oh, the dignity he shows this young woman. Do not go glean from any other field, he tells her, or leave this one, but keep close to my young women. Let your eyes be on this field that they are reaping and go after them. See, a person of transformative charity shares their resources. He's not like, just today and then get out of here. He's like, just lock it down right here. You stay in this field as long as you want, as long as you need. So open with his resources. Have I not charged the young men not to touch you? See, a person of transformative charity secures protection for others. Have I told my men, don't touch you? Whether that's sexual or violence, he told, right? Because she could be beaten up, taken advantage of, molested, whatever it is. He told his work crew, you touch her, I'm taking your hand off. So 3,000 years ago, the first kind of anti-harassment work clause, which is incredible that he would do that. He goes, not in my field, not on my watch, not with my workers. You are safe, protected. That's transformative charity, securing the protection of another. And when you are thirsty, he tells her, go to the vessels and drink what the young men have drawn. And you should have gone, oh, but you don't get it, right? Because we're not living in that day and age. So here's what transformative charity, it scandalously honors. And that's what he did right there. Because in that day and age, the foreigner drew water for the women, and the women drew water for the men to drink. And what does he do? He says, what the guys drink, hey, you foreign woman, you come drink that, what they drew. That is scandalous honor. I mean, this does not deserve it. He is lifting her up to this just crazy place. I mean, the original audience would be like, he did what? The Lord repay you, verse 12, for what you have done. And a full reward, it means your full wages be given to you by the Lord. See, a person of transformative charity always seeks the best. I mean, he's like, invoking God. He's like, man, I hope God repays you for what you did for Naomi. I hope God gives you a full wage, a full blessing. Like, he's not just like, okay, take a little bit, I'll just get. He's like, no, I want what is best for you to flourish. Verse 14, so they go back to work, and then kind of a break for lunch in verse 14. At mealtime, Boaz says to her, come here, eat some bread. Dip your morsel in the wine. So she sat beside the reapers, and he passed grain to her. Now again, if we romanticize this is kind of like the first date, and they go to Macaroni Grill, and they get the bread, and they dip it in the little stuff there in the middle, and like, he feeds her and wipes her mouth, or whatever. That's not it. That's not what happens. There's no romance here. But what happens, transformative charity, you serve personally. And she's like respecting the culture. She's keeping her distance from him. He says, no. Come here. Come sit by me. Eat the food that we have for the workers. Not only that, a servant doesn't serve her. Who serves her? He passed her the roasted grain. Transformative charity, serving her personally, so honoring, so dignifying to her. And she ate until she was satisfied and had some leftovers, right? The first Chinese to-go box ever, right here. A person of transformative charity satisfies the needs. This some left over, it emphasizes Boaz's generosity, just abundance to her, right? Just incredible. Verse 15, when she rose to glean, Boaz instructed his young men saying, let her glean. Even among the sheaves, do not reproach her, and also pull out some from the bundles for her. Leave it for her to glean. Do not rebuke her. See, a person of transformative charity is safe psychologically. It's not like, you can be here, and I'm not gonna shame you. What are you doing? This, that, we're gonna make comments. He goes, no. Not just physical safety, emotional safety, mental safety in my field, under my care, under my watch. No one's gonna rebuke you. No one's gonna reproach you. This is transformative charity. So yes, a man of integrity, a man of charity. Thirdly, here's the third aspect of his character. He is a man of humility. Look back in verse 12. Oh, this is so beautiful. He says to her, let the Lord repay you for what you've done. Full reward be given to you by the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge. So he acknowledges her conversion. You forsook the gods of Moab, and you have come into and trusted in one God, Yahweh. You are coming under his wing, his protection, his refuge. But here's what else I love about this. Boaz takes no credit. I mean, you know what he could have done here, right? You've come under my wing. I've stacked it up. Look how generous I am. I'm leaving it. I'm telling you to give you more. I brought you over. I gave you this. I served you the grain. Look at me. Look what I've done for you. I feel great about myself. And he realizes Ruth has come under the care of God through Boaz. He takes no credit. He said, you are under God's wing. I'm just a conduit. I'm just a vehicle. I'm just an instrument that God can display his loving kindness to you. How else does God display it? This is the silent hand of God working through the people of God to show this loving kindness to such a desperate, needy girl. What can we learn from Boaz? See, the character, Boaz in the story, he shows us the character of God, does he not? I mean, is God not one of impeccable integrity? We see the humility in Christ Jesus, and God displays transformative charity. God sees people. He shows dignity. He shares his resource. He secures our protection. He will scandalously honor us. He seeks our best. He personally serves us. He satisfies our needs. And he is always psychologically safe. Boaz is like God, and we should be too. I'd ask you today, what is your character? What's your logo? What's your brand? What are the 2 or 3 things about you that arrive before you get there? Is it integrity, charity, humility? Oh, what a great stamp, what a great mark that would be. But what is it about us? Are we demonstrating, showing, and manifesting the character of God through our actions? And I think we also learned this from Boaz. Who in your life are you saying to, God's got you under his wing through my care and provision? Who is the stranger? Who's the foreigner? Who's the alien? Who's the outsider? Who's the desperate, destitute, falling on hard times? Who's the person that's alone and bitter and scared? That God is manifesting his loving kindness to them through you. Can we name people that God has taken under their wing through our being a conduit and a vehicle and a care? I think we ought to be. Are we seeing people? Do we show dignity? Do we share our resources? Do we help secure protection for the vulnerable? Do we scandalously honor others? Do we seek their best? Are we personally serving them? Are we satisfying their needs? Do we help them feel psychologically safe? I hope so. And when that happens, when God manifests his loving kindness through the people of God, my friends, it is transformative. It changes Ruth and Naomi. Look at this. Look how it changes them. Look what can happen in a day's time. So Ruth, we know how she's going into this field, what she's thinking, the tension that's there. But after Boaz does this to her, here's what she says in verse 10. She falls on her face. She bows to the ground. It's the word worship there. Now, she's not worshiping him as God, but she's taking on a worship posture before him. And she says, why have I found favor in your eyes, that you would take notice of me, since I am a foreigner? So she moves. She's transformed from fret and fear of a foreigner to favored like a family member. We see this. She says, I found favor in your eyes. My Lord, verse 13, you have comforted me. She goes from concern, and his actions has brought her comfort, right? It's a word that means like release of stress. I mean, she's so worried, she's so tense, and now she can breathe again. She's comforted. She goes from humiliated to honored, from starving and scavenging and striving to satisfied with surplus. Then at the end of the chapter, when she's kind of recounting this story to Naomi, she says, he said to me, you shall keep close by my young men. Literally, that word, it's a word that means cling to, cling to. It's the same word used of Ruth when she clinged to Naomi in chapter 1. So she goes from being isolated to included. Now you've got failure, you can cling to, be right here. What can you and I learn from Ruth? You and I, spiritually speaking, are Ruth. Because of sin, we come into this world as strangers, as foreigners, as outsiders, and alien to God. We are desperate, we are destitute, we are beggars. And unless we find favor and grace of someone, we are completely dependent upon the mercy and grace of some king, of some Lord. And unless we find that, we are toast. We have to find someone who is willing, who is able. This is our story. So what are we to do? Cling to God. Stay in his field. Don't go any other field. There's lots of fields out there. The field of success, prosperity, power, position, accolades, accumulation, pleasure, hedonism, whatever. There's lots of fields. But none of those fields you will be truly satisfied in. We have to cling to God and stay in his field, find his grace and his favor. How she was transformed in a day. Lastly, I love Naomi. Look at how she was transformed by this. So Ruth gleaned in the field until evening. She beat out what she had gleaned. It was about an ephah of barley. And I'm like, what's an ephah? So I went and did some research on it. And one scholar said it's a tenth of a homer. And I'm like, not helpful. So I did some more research. So she comes back to Naomi with probably 50 pounds of grain. So you just gotta imagine, like Naomi sends Ruth out thinking she may not come back at all. She may come out abused, molested, hurt, taken advantage of. Best case scenario, she actually comes back and has maybe a pound. She rolls up with 50 pounds in a doggy bag from the macaroni grill. So you gotta imagine Naomi right now, right? Wide-eyed as Ruth is like hauling 50 pounds of barley in a doggy bag up to the house. She took it up, she went to the city. Her mother-in-law saw what she had gleaned. She also brought out and gave her what she had left over from being satisfied. And the mother-in-law said to her, "Where did you glean today? Where have you worked and blessed the man who took notice of you?" So she told her mother-in-law with whom she had worked, and she said, "The man's name with whom I work today is," cut to commercial. Like, that would be the cut to commercial spot, right? If there was a show. Because we're hanging on. Like, Naomi's jaw is already on the floor. Wait till Ruth tells her this name. She says, "It's Boaz." And Naomi said to her daughter-in-law, "May he, Boaz, be blessed by the Lord, whose kindness has not forsaken the living or the dead." Who's she talking about in that second phrase? Whose kindness? It's not Boaz. It's God. She is talking about Yahweh, God. This is the same Naomi who rolled into Bethlehem saying, "Call me bitter. The Lord has dealt a severe blow to me." And now, through the kindness of Boaz, it has softened her heart. It has melted her heart. And now it's an aha realization moment. This is the climax and the pinnacle of two. This statement right here. Because she goes, "I thought the Lord had abandoned me. I thought he had given up on me. And now I know the silent hand of God has been working the whole time. His loving kindness is for me. He's never left me. And my friend, today, he's never left you." I know some of your stories. I know the grief, the darkness that sat on you, the hard times you've walked through. You may have thought you were full, and now you feel empty. You may have lost and suffered and sorrow and pain. Let this story remind you, God's loving kindness has not abandoned you. He has not abandoned you. All the snapshots of your life, he is working out a beautiful story of redemption. And maybe it doesn't end up like this. Maybe it's not completed until heaven one day, but my friend, he's not forgotten you. His loving kindness is for you, even when you can't see it at times. Chapter 2 ends, Naomi's transformed from hateful, hopeless to hopeful. He's a kinsman redeemer, a Goel, someone who has the means and may be willing to do something about the desperate place we find ourselves, about the crisis we're in. And we'll see if he does it or not in the remaining chapters. Let's pray. God, you are so good. Your character, your nature is impeccable. Thank you for seeing us, for honoring us, for protecting us, for serving us. God, your lavish, generous charity toward us, I pray that it is transformative. It's the kindness of the Lord that brings us to repentance. Without favor, without grace, we're toast. Thank you that you would be willing to honor, to love, to sacrifice for the alien, the foreigner, the desperate, the destitute. God, may those of us who have received that grace and forgiveness, who have entered into your field and your kingdom, may we truly be satisfied there. And God, may you give us your character imprinted on our souls and our lives, that we could go out and do the same for others. God, and thank you for this tremendous message. for those who are sitting in grief and sorrow and suffering and pain. Could they take hope today that you've not abandoned them? You never will. Your loving kindness is there. You're working all the time. God, we love you. We need you. Thank you for this beautiful chapter and what it means and can do, and may it transform us. It's in your precious name we pray. Amen.